Welcome to week 5 of the QUT Design Lab series of videos supporting our program based on Wendy Laura Belcher's second edition of Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks. I acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara peoples as the traditional custodians of the unceded lands in Meanjin, where I'm recording this, and I recognise that these lands and waterways have always been places of teaching, learning, research, creativity, storytelling, and arts. I'm your writing wellbeing coach, Dr. Abby Winter, and this week we're looking at refining your references. But first, as always, a reflection, a slightly longer one this week. In his delightful, if now a little outdated, time management book, The Clockwork Muse, A Practical Guide to Writing Theses, Dissertations, and Books, on page 33, Evyatar Zerubabel writes about time A, writing, versus time B, ancillary to writing. Think about how much of each you do in your scheduled writing time. Are you actually putting pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, words on recording to write? Or are you spending some or all of your writing time doing things that feed and enable your writing, the reading, organising your literature, tidying your desk? Maybe you need to start thinking about these two types of time differently. Maybe you need to do one before the other, because what you write can also raise questions for what you need to go and research next. Thinking back to our reflection a couple of weeks ago on productive writing time, are you scheduling your actual writing time A for when you're most productive? You'll also need to schedule a time B to feed your brain the way it needs. Does it need stimulation immediately before you write? Do you write as you read? Then it's fine to have both in the one productive session. That's going to work for you. But if you need a bit of time for that clever back of your brain to churn through stuff, then you might need to do a bit of planning and work backwards from your productive time. If you're a night person, that could mean spending the morning doing your literature searches and reading. If you're a morning person, you might need to do that the afternoon before. The best thing you can do to become a better and more productive writer is to know how you work best and then arrange your calendar to make that possible. So, on to this week's topic. Is there a way that you can organise your literature review by debate in view of your argument? Okay. Let's start by going through the different types of literature. First, there is primary literature. On page 153, Belcher goes through the types: archival, media, ethnographic, statistical, experiment, literary, visual, oral, music and conversations, or online. Remember that you need to do deep engagement and analysis with these types of sources. They're likely to be your main source of evidence. Next is scholarly or secondary literature. On pages 154 to 156, Belcher talks about 4 main types. The first is contextual, which she suggests should be mentioned in your introduction and limited to a maximum of 3. It's basically the scene setting and background to what's going on. The second type of secondary literature is methodological, because they're the ones that you've taken how you do your method from. I'd usually use Stake, for example, if I was writing up a case study rather than Yin. And then I'd do a couple of sentences about why I find Stake's constructivist process more aligned to my way of researching than Yin's more positivistic approach. The third type is theoretical, which is about the way you think about your research. I'm doing some research at the moment which falls under a feminist theoretical approach, so I'm having to do some reading in that space. And those words I use to describe Stake and Yin, constructivist and positivist, they're theoretical terms. Belcher's fourth type is a bit of a catch-all, which she calls related secondary literature. They're the ones that are making similar arguments to you or that look at similar topics or sources. They're the ones that you traditionally find in a literature review. And they're the ones that she spends a lot of the rest of this chapter talking about, including a table on page 182 for you to fill in on the number of each type of literature you're using to help you decide where you need to cut and where needs more support. Finally, there are derivative or tertiary documents, which are not the highest quality sources to be referencing and which we don't even call literature. On pages 156 to 157, Belcher only spends a few paragraphs on them because they're the textbooks, websites, news articles, and other sources like encyclopedias that are great to point you at the original primary or secondary literature that you should be quoting. Remember that you need to add your analysis to whatever literature you're using. You can't just list your sources and then brush your hands together and think, job done. You need to tie them all back into your argument. Why are they here? Do they set the stage for the new thing you're suggesting? Do some of them contradict what you're saying? And you've got them here to take their arguments apart. On pages 159 to 161, Belcher goes through some nice strategies for citing, including making sure you read the related books and articles on your topic, making sure that your perspective is the main one in the article, and one that I really struggle with, making sure you're summarizing, evaluating, and analyzing the works you're citing, not just quoting them. She ends that section with two great reminders. If you've already written anything in the space, cite yourself. And if the journal you're targeting has published anything on your topic, cite that. Luckily, you've done her journal evaluation, right? So you'll have a good idea of what's in the journal already. Okay. The next section she basically goes through is academic integrity, making sure you're not plagiarizing. And those are things I hope we all do already. Take good notes of where quotes and ideas come from, even if it's from your own previously published work. Revise your work. Make sure your argument is strong. That matters more than perfect English. And paraphrasing rather than copying out exact words from sources, which, as I've just said, I struggle with because I just fall in love with other people's beautiful words. But I do make myself write a précis, a short summary of the article or book or whatever in my own words that I add to my research tracking spreadsheet and which I often use when I'm introducing a text that I'm citing. And speaking of my research tracking spreadsheet, her next few pages are all about strategies for getting the reading done, which includes setting up your research management system, taking sparing notes and making sure you read a bit, then write a bit. All right, now we're getting into the really useful section of the chapter. Firstly, on pages 175 to 177, Belcher talks about your entry point, which could be a gap, supporting or connecting to previous research, or correcting previous research. If you're filling in the book as we go, she's got a little box on page 178 for you to write down what your entry point is. Are you coming through a gap, supporting or correcting previous work? On page 183, Belcher talks about your citation values, which I must confess isn't something I'd thought about before I read her book, but now I'm very aware of. Because who you cite says a lot about you as a researcher. For example, in a feminist theory-based article that I co-authored with colleagues a few years ago, my first thought was using the work of two middle-aged white men, one for the main methodology and one as the organizing principle for analyzing the data I was collecting. So I reached out to my co-authors and a couple of them sent back more feminist appropriate references to use. Belcher's main message is to be a little bit reflexive and thoughtful about who you're citing. Are there people of colour? Are there women? Are there voices who have been historically neglected or silenced? She has a table on page 185 that you can fill in to help you be more thoughtful about who you reference. Belcher concludes this chapter with some lovely recommendations on how to get going on the reading you need to, including a great suggestion on page 187 to help you evaluate rather than just summarize a text. Finish full sentences about it that start, "This article argues that." "The author takes the side of," and "a weakness of this article is." Finally, on page 188, she has 6 dot points that are best covered in conversation. Find a willing friend or partner and get them to ask you the questions in order. Give yourself time to take notes. Ask them to take notes while you talk. Or best of all, if you can, record the conversation and then transcribe it back afterwards. They're about the relationships you see between texts and between scholars, how scholars justify their arguments, how those arguments are similar to or different from yours, what key concepts or theories are in use, what the limitations of this literature is, and whether you can see a cohesive narrative across all of it. So, as always at the end, open up your calendar and plan out next week's writing. And for homework, we're going to be looking at your claims for significance next week. So take a look at pages 193 to 195 on types of claims. Then, for those doing the program through the QUT Design Lab, email through 3 of your claims for significance in the piece you're working on. Review pages 203 to 208 on giving feedback, then find someone else in this group and swap articles. Belcher gives instructions for this on page 209, including asking for the type of feedback you want. And she provides a table to fill in on page 210, which should take you about an hour. Finally, track your writing time, and I'll see you next week.